Welcome to my back garden. Even though I live in Texas and it is called a backyard, you can't get the Englishman out of the man. So welcome to my back garden, as we would call it in England. It's a beautiful evening, and I'd like to bring to you in my back garden 4 responses to the question that I posed in the blog last week. The blog was all about coming out of isolation, and the question was, what did we learn about ourselves in coming out of isolation? Of the many responses we got, I chose 4 responses that I want to present to you now, and some wisdom to go along with it. So the first response I want to present to you comes from a female college student. She said, "Here's what I've learned in isolation about myself. I've begun to think deeper, and it's revealing who I am." Now, here's what I want to say in response to that response. Sometimes the price of clarity about ourselves is actually an offense. The offense is directed towards our minds in what we think. When our minds are offended, it tends to reveal what is in our heart. Now, what I mean by offense is nothing belligerent or rude, but according to the scriptures, we should set our minds on things above, and that we should renew our minds. And in addition to loving God with all our heart, soul, and strength, we should love Him with our minds as well. So what this girl is saying is, during isolation, she's learned to think deeper, and it's revealing who she really is. And the price of that is an offense to how she used to think. So time and space in isolation has cleared the way for her to think deeper. What a beautiful thing to learn in isolation. The second response I've chosen to present to you is from a young man in university, and he said, "Here's what I've learned in isolation." He said, "I've lost my job and I feel worthless." Well, here's what I want to say to this student, as I would say to anyone that has lost their job during isolation. Stop evaluating yourself against the job and start to evaluate the job against you. You see, you have a set of skills, and you've learned those skills doing various jobs throughout your life. Now, it could be there is a position for you that you've never held before, but you have the skills for that job. Well, I know from employers that there are 2 predominant questions they ask. The first is, can you collaborate with others? The second is, can you problem solve? Now, both of those skills could be learnt in ABC job, but the job that is waiting for you, you've never had before, but you've got the skills for it. Remember that Moses was trained in the palace so he could lead in the desert, and Joseph was trained in the desert, or a prison, so he could lead in the palace. You see, you've had all kinds of experiences that have developed skills in you. It's connecting those skills with those who are looking for them. Keep working hard at it and connect those 2 points, and you'll find fulfillment. What a wonderful thing to learn in isolation. So the third response that I chose comes from a university student who explains that he learned who his friends really were during isolation. Now, 20 years ago when I moved to the United States, this is something I confronted, and I had to learn very quickly that within an American context, there is a difference between networking and friendships. Networking is basically, what do I want from you and what do you want from me? And as long as we're asking that question, we have a commodity for each other. But when there is no commodity, people tend to walk away from those connections. But friendships are something far different. And we mustn't confuse networking with friendship. Now, over the years, those two have merged together, and so false expectations have been placed on people as though they were friends, but no, they were really part of a network. Now, that's something quite profound to learn in isolation that will prevent further heartache in the future. The fourth and final response that I want to present to you is a student quoting Julian Barnes, who is a New York Times columnist. He said, in response to the question, what did you learn about yourself during isolation? He said, I learned that I don't believe in God, and yet I miss him. Now, that's actually quite revealing. I corresponded with the student for a while, and I got to understand a little more of what they meant. You see, belief in God does not begin with study. It doesn't begin with reading articles and books. It doesn't even begin with reading the Bible. It begins with what's called a lived experience. We don't find God. God actually finds us. And when we encounter God, we experience him, and then we start to learn what it is that we have experienced. Now, I believe that, especially in this present time of postmodernity or Generation Z, or however you want to label it, experience is what comes first before belief actually starts to emerge in our lives. You find that example right the way through the New Testament, where people encountered God before people actually had a belief in God. So that's quite a revealing thing to learn in isolation. So in the meantime, I want to say Toodle-loo from my back garden here in Texas, and I trust you'll catch up with me again on the blogs. Take care.